Amen. Okay, so we have been away for some time. I don't know how many of you caught that piddly video that I put up that I couldn't even figure out the technology without my brother Thomas over here. But we didn't come back to 2 Samuel. So you've been without 2 Samuel for a couple of weeks. So let's just get a quick refresher in so that we remember where we're at. We've had this whole story arc with David trying to restore his relationship, or actually being encouraged to restore his relationship with what is now his heir, Absalom. And now in this passage you're going to see the turn. The turn where they really, the relationship is irrevocably broken. And of course, this is a sad thing. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into the text. We're going to be looking today at chapter 15 of 2 Samuel, verses 10 through the end of the chapter. It says there in verse 10, it says, "But Absalom," so we need to know what is he countering to. And immediately prior to this, when we last met, where we ended in this story was the king had told Absalom that he was free to go to Hebron in peace to be able to offer sacrifice to Yahweh. He literally says to him in the previous passage, "Go in peace." So that's where we're setting in with our but here. And now I've told you before that I sat under a pastor for some time that said everything after but is sin. And maybe you feel that way, I don't know, but that is not always in the case. But in this case, it certainly is, because David has given his blessing over to Absalom to be able to go and make offerings. And he's not going to any place either. This isn't arbitrary that he would go towards Hebron. That was, of course, David's capital for 7.5 years. But he says, "Go in peace," and Absalom, instead of going in peace, he sends spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, it says in verse 10, saying, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron." Okay? So they're listening for the sound. Now, I brought in my shofar a few times. I don't want to blast it in this little room because I'd probably blow you right back out into the cold. So we're not going to do that today. But this idea that the coronation of a king comes with a trumpet blast comes from way, way, way back. Okay, so we even hear it in the word itself. To coronate a king is to crown a king. And then we get similar instances, the same root word when we talk about it Thanksgiving every year, a cornucopia, right? And this is a wooden or a fashioned trumpet shape that pours forth blessing. There's this same idea that the coronation of a king is supposed to be a time of great blessing for the people. This new hope that we have. We see similar kind of hope in people and some people when we elect a new president. When we elect a president, everybody's like, this guy's going to fix a lot of the issues that we had. There's this idea of a coronation and blessing. We even see it, those of you who are involved in band, in the instrument, the cornet, the miniature horn. That comes from the French, but it's the same root again. And it comes from this idea that a new king is heralded by a trumpet blast. And so that's what they're saying to listen for. Then it says in verse 11, "Then 200 men went with Absalom from Jerusalem, who were invited and went innocently." So he's telling them, look, we're going to go make offering in Hebron. You come with us, 200 people. They did not know anything. But what we'll see is they didn't fight it either, right? And so it says in verse 12, "And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city Gilo, where he was offering the sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom." So he's gaining steam. He's starting to gather to himself David's trusted advisors. Now this Gilo, this is a part of the tribal allotment of Judah. So he's actually gaining ground from within David's own house. And he's able to do this because, hello, he's the son of David, right? All right. So what we need to see here is that not everything that looks spiritual is. So that's the first thing that I want you to take away from this passage that we've just gone over. There is a great spirituality that this is presented in. Absalom says, I'm going to go make offerings to Yahweh, right? And then he says, I'm going to do all the things that signify a God-ordained king. And sometimes we see these things and we interpret these signs, even sometimes subconsciously. But you need to understand that not everything that looks spiritual is indeed spiritual. Now, it says that a messenger came in verse 13 to David, saying that the heart of the men of Israel are with Absalom. Now, you remember Absalom was a guy good looking in appearance. Everybody thought, man, that Absalom, he's going to make a great king someday. And he had actually been able to win favor with the people by stepping into the role of judge. Oh, well, if I was king, this is how I would preside over this case, that we've discussed before. And so David sees that the hearts of the people are turning against him. And he says, David said to all the servants who are with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, for otherwise none of us will escape from Absalom. Go in haste, or he will overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. So here again, you see that David is exercising good wisdom, right? Now, there are moments when good leaders will preserve the unity of what they are shepherding or what they are over at their own personal expense. And that's what David is doing here. He's actually saying, look, I'm going to step aside, and I'll continue real quick so we can illustrate this point. He says, so the king went out and chose out of all of his household with him, and the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. Then the king went out, and all the people with him, they stopped at the last house. Now, the last house is significant because this is what's called liminal space. So this is the outermost edge of the kingdom, of the city of Jerusalem. And he's stopping at the last house to do the last edict of the king kind of thing. So on the inside of the city, he's a king. On the outside of the city, he's an exile, right? And so he stops at the last house. Now his servants all passed on beside him. It says all the Kerethites and the Pelethites and the Gittites, 600 men who had come with him from Gath, okay? So these are, many people believe, these are the Philistines. When you remember when he went in and he was working under Achish, and he was serving in the Philistine army when he was butting heads with Saul. Well, he makes these relationships with the Philistines, and these Philistine tribes actually come over with him when he attains kingship, when he gets the monarchy, and they become kind of like his royal guard, okay? Now, there are some question about some of these terms, like Kerethite. The Septuagint reinforces this idea that these are Philistines because it calls them literally Cretans. Some of you may be familiar with the term Cretan. That comes from the island of Crete. And of course, we call people Cretans because the scripture says Cretans are liars, right? Now, it says that the Kerethites is also a muddy term because in the Agadah, which is an interpretive text of the Jews, it actually tells us that the Kerethites were the Sanhedrin. So there's some confusion there about from Jewish text over to what we know from history. Now these Pelethites, they're an interesting one too because you can almost hear the toponym there, Pelethi or Philistia. Philistia and Pelethia, okay? And so we believe that these are, again, a Philistine tribe, and then of course the Gittites come from Gath. But when the king said to Ittai the Gittite, why will you also go with us? Return and remain with the king, for you're a foreigner and also an exile. Return to your own place. So he sees this Gathite person who's come over to serve him. This is a man, mind you, who is already himself in exile, is what the text tells us. And yet the picture that the writer is painting here is that the son of the house of the king is unfaithful, but the foreigner is faithful. Do you see this? Now, this man, Ittai, he says to him, you came only yesterday. He'd not even been there long. And he says, shall I make you today wander with us? while I go where I will? Return and take back your brothers. Mercy and truth be with you. But Ittai, the faithful one, almost reminiscent of Ruth and Naomi, says, as the Lord lives and as my Lord the king lives, surely wherever my Lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there also your servant shall be. Okay, so loyalty. We see in this loyalty of the foreigner. Loyalty and character are shown when there's nothing to gain. Sometimes we have these opportunities to be able to show our innermost intentions. And we get these moments when we're challenged or pushed. So a lot of times we see these challenges crop up in our lives, and the issue here is that we don't like we much rather things be easy, right? Aren't we all happy when things go according to plan? And yet we know that God uses these things to not only bring about a proper character in us, but sometimes I would suggest to you that it's in order for us to prove ourselves to ourselves. God already knows all things, right? He already sees the innermost parts, but I look in the mirror and I doubt the man I see there. And so God uses these times of trouble to teach me, who am I? How will I respond? And for this man, he responded favorably. He stayed with David. It says, therefore David said to Ittai, go and pass over. And so Ittai the Gittite passed over with all this men and all the little ones who were with him. He brought his children. That's commitment, right? He's placing his children in harm's way, potentially, to stay faithful to the king. Now it says there, while the country was weeping with a loud voice, all the people passed over. The king also passed over the brook Kidron. So if you think of Ophel, where the city of David is, it comes down kind of like a V. And on one side you have the Tyropoeon Valley, and on the other side you have the Kidron. The Kidron is to the east, so he's passing over the Kidron Valley. He's actually going to go up the Mount of Olives to be able to go up on the other side and towards the Jordan Valley. So he passes over the Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. And it says, now behold, Zadok came also, and all the Levites with him, carrying the ark of the covenant of God. Where the king should go, well, the ark should go, right? And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar came up until all the people had finished passing from the city. But the king said to Zadok, return the ark of God to the city. If I find favor, that wasn't ideal. If I find favor in the Lord's sight, then he will bring me back again and show me both it and his habitation. But if he should say, thus, I have no delight in you, behold, here I am, let him do to me as seems good to him. And so here is David. He's not wanting to take advantage of this kind of status that he has as king to be able to leverage God against the people. You see, when we do things, and I would say that this is a straight comparison to Absalom. Absalom seeks to gather the people based on this idea that the Lord is moving his hand from David to the son Absalom. He's going to this very significant place. He's offering sacrifices. He's blowing the trumpets. And David could rebuke him and say, but the ark is with me. But David refuses to leverage God against the people. And even the fact that he is withdrawing from Jerusalem, he's showing that his concern is greater with the welfare of the people of Jerusalem than it is even with his own monarchy. Right? So, David says to him, he says, return. He says, but if he should say this, I have no delight in you. This is God. Behold, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. He says, I'm submitted. I'm in total submission to God. Now, this strikes me because I think that a lot of times when we feel the pressure when we might be inclined to do the thing that would dishonor God or dishonor our relationships with others, that it's in those moments that we have greatest need of being in submission. It is in those moments of trial and test that we should, in fact, submit ourselves to the will of God. Now, as we'll see, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's floating like a leaf in the wind. He's not making any preparations. So he says, I have no delight in you. Behold, here I am. Let him do to me as good seems good to him. And the king said also to Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Here's this man coming out. Are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, and your son Ahimaaz, and Jonathan, the son of Abiathar. He said, see, I am going to wait at the fords of the wilderness until the word comes from you to inform me. Therefore Zadok and Abiathar returned the ark of God to Jerusalem and remained there. So he's sending these priests who, by the way, these priests held a great amount of power over the people. They could speak and the people listened because they were literally speaking for God, right? And he's saying, no, you go back. There's a different plan here. He even challenges Zadok. He says, aren't you a seer? Don't you know what's going to happen here? Perhaps David is exercising faith that the same God who delivered him from Saul because he would not raise his hand against the Lord's anointed will now deliver him in his time of need. He says, aren't you a seer? Don't you see what's going to happen? Either God will be with me or he won't. Now he says, see, I'm going to wait at the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. And so Zadok and Abiathar returned. He's going to use them later in this text. It says, and David went up and ascended the Mount of Olives. So he's on the other side of the Kidron Valley now. He's walking up the Mount of Olives. So if you've ever been to the Mount of Olives, it's actually really beautiful up there. It's a great overlook. Now you can see, of course, the Temple Mount and the whole city spread out before you. So he's weeping as he goes up this mountain. Does weeping on the Mount of Olives sound familiar? It should. Now, it says, and his head was covered, and he walked barefoot, and then all the people who were with him, each covered his head and went up weeping as they went. He said, now someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. Now this Ahithophel, this is the first time he's ever mentioned in the text, but many scholars believe him to be the grandfather of Bathsheba. So that kind of betrays some of his intents in this. But Ahithophel, literally, the name means one who would offer folly. Okay? One who would offer folly. But he's supposed to be this very wise man. And as a matter of fact, Absalom has sought him out to be counsel to him because he's trusted by the people. All right? So Ahithophel is with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, make the counsel of Ahithophel foolishness. Now, I don't know if you've ever had someone that you prayed that their counsel will be foolishness, but this falls in the line of what we would call imprecatory prayers. Now, obviously, we love our enemies, right? But sometimes those enemies, we want to put them under the judgment of God, right? Like, we would love nothing more in our own selfish and flesh that they would be, God, just have your way with them. Be careful when you pray these kind of prayers, because I think we invite ourselves into judgment when we do this. But there are many places in the Psalms and elsewhere in Scripture where we see imprecatory prayers. And he's telling him, he's saying, well, I hope Absalom gets just the worst counsel ever. That's what he's saying. And so it says that it happened as David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped. And keep that in mind. God was worshipped on the Mount of Olives. There were sacrifices that were made in the city. But God was worshipped on the Mount of Olives. That behold, Hushai the Archite met with him with his coat torn and dust on his head. Now, we know these Archites because in Joshua 16:2, it tells us that they were a Canaanite people. So this is one of the natives of the land. And this man comes in, he's got his coat torn, he's got dust on his head. He is grieving because his king is having to flee the capital. This tells you the kind of control that David had. David is backed by the people who should not support him. Meanwhile, the people who should most be willing to support him have turned against him, his own family. He says, but if you return to the city and say to Absalom, he says, David said to him, if you pass over with me, then you'll be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I have been your father's servant in times past, so I will now be your servant. Then you can thwart the counsel of Ahithophel for me. Are not Zadok and Abiathar the priests there with you also? So it shall be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall report to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest. He knows these men are faithful. He says, behold, their two sons are with them, there Ahimaaz and Zadok's son and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and then by them you shall send me everything that you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. Okay? So the end of our text lets us know that even though David is trusting in God, he believes that God will provide, he's still himself exercising prudence and making plans. He wants to know the information, right? He's got to be able to have this information to make good judgments. And so he's asking, look, you tell Zadok, and Zadok will tell me. I don't know if any of you are Andy Griffith fans. When Opie kills the mother bird, and there's the three birds that he saves, and then there's this really funny part, it sticks in my mind always, where Opie says, well, how will I know whether the birds are happy? And then he says, well, Winkin will tell Blinkin, Blinkin will tell Nod, Nod will tell Barney, and Barney will tell you. Okay, because Barney's been acting like he can talk to birds. Anyways, that's kind of the chain of command as far as I can see it. I don't even know how that connects to the text. It's just, well, you know. I think he would be Winkin. Yeah, he's the start. Yeah. All right. Guys, we've talked about over and over, though, how David is like this typology of Christ. And now here we get this beautiful picture, right? David is under duress, and he is setting himself up, basically, opening himself up to the will of God. And he's, instead of entering the city, he's exiting the city. And where does he come? He comes to the Mount of Olives. He comes to the Mount of Olives, where God is worshipped. And it's there that he weeps and he pleads before God. And in the New Testament, this is what I think is so cool. In the New Testament, we see Jesus, and he's coming into the city as a triumphal king. He's not being exiled, he's being coronated. But he's coming into the city, and what is he doing? He's laying down his own will. He's saying, just like David did, that the people have so much importance that I'm willing to give myself, even to set aside my own authority and power and promise. He's saying, I'm willing to set that aside so that the people could be brought in, so that the people would be made safe. And he's doing this at a very key place. He's going to the Mount of Olives, where God is worshipped. And he's seeking God fervently with tears, just like David. And what is he telling us? He's telling us that he is King. He is Lord. He has come to deliver his people. And even though there may be a usurper who comes in and tries to steal the authority of the rightful king, that the king places himself and his authority before the goodness of the people. He's basically saying, I am going to do this for you. It's the same thing that David said in this passage. He is relinquishing authority. Guys, these kind of pictures would be so apparent to an ancient audience. They would see these things, see what Jesus is doing, and these confirmed His messianic identity. These told who He was and what He came to accomplish. And the Jews, the people who should have known these signs the best, these people, they turned away because their hearts were hardened. Their eyes were darkened for a time. But guys, we look forward to a time when this King will make another triumphal return into the eternal city. And it's on account of His goodness that He came in the first place to deliver man from sin. And it will be again on account of His goodness that He comes again to set all things right, to make this wicked world be conformed and restored and renewed. And guys, this beautiful bookend of the Scriptures, that when Jesus comes to do this act, that there in the garden was the tree of life, and there in the new city, there will again be the tree of life. A full circle, God bringing all things to fruition. And that's the kind of Messiah that we serve. That's who Jesus is, the good King who lays Himself down on account of the people. So, as we look at these texts, we understand why David was a man after God's own heart. And I know this because I believe that when God saw David, He saw in the future what His son would come to do. And that's a really beautiful picture. Jesus came on behalf of all of us. He came and He lived as a man, yet without sin. And all of us, fallen by the wayside, struggling against the flesh, against the world. And yet, here is Jesus coming to the sinner. This is God in the flesh, mind you. Holy, holy, holy. And He comes to us in order that we who have no life might be given a life. His life. His life. Paid on the cross. A substitutionary atonement. He dies so that we may live. Because without blood, there is no remission of sin. And the wages of sin is death. This is the gospel. Plain and simple. And I'm here to tell you that if you look in this book, from Genesis to Revelation, you'll see this singular, consistent story borne out again and again and again and again. God didn't make any accidents. We look in Leviticus, where all New Year's reading plans go to die. And we see that God is giving pictures of Holy Communion in Leviticus. And what is this communion? That we should take of the body and the flesh and the blood. That we would become a part of who Jesus is. And He become a part of who we are. To receive His identity. So that when God sees us, the Father, He sees His own Son, who He loves so desperately. Now, that is a beautiful, beautiful picture. And it's a picture of a God who is worthy of our worship. And so I would just ask you, have you been living for what Jesus died for? That's a hard challenge. It's a hard challenge, but it's one we need to consider every single day. If you do not have a relationship with Jesus Christ, or your relationship with Him has not been what you believe, what you're convicted and convinced that it ought to have been, then I'm going to invite up our worship team. They're going to play a song of invitation. And it is my sincere desire that if you find yourself in this position, that today would be the day that you would submit yourself to Him as ruler and King of your life. And let me tell you, He's a good King. We hear a lot about the authority of God, and it's often in the context of God's authority to condemn or God's authority to do with whatever He wants to with His creation, and those things may be true. But one thing that is also true, and what is innate to God, is His benevolence and His goodness. And so we are submitting ourselves over to Him because His goodness is so good to us. And I would encourage you, as they play, consider these things. Consider how God used David, how God might use you, how even in your suffering, God might have someone who will watch the way you walk in your suffering, and that God will be magnified. God will be pleased with the way that you live your life. That's my prayer. As they play, if you have a decision to make, you're welcome.